Boston, the summer of 1920. There is a line outside a little office on School Street, and the line does not stop. It runs down the stairs, out the door, and along the street, and it is made of ordinary people. A grocer in his apron who closed his shop to be here. A widow with a cloth purse. A young policeman on his day off. A pair of immigrant brothers who between them have their whole savings folded into an envelope. They are all clutching money, and they are all smiling, and they are all waiting to hand that money to a small, dapper, beaming man in a beautiful suit who has promised them the one thing no honest person on earth can promise. He has told them he will double it. Not in 10 years. In 90 days. And here is the part I need you to sit with before we go one step further. It is working. The people at the front of that line came a few weeks ago, and they were paid exactly what he promised, in cash, with a smile. And they told everyone they knew, and that is why the line now runs around the block. Nobody in that line thinks they are being robbed. Every single one of them thinks they are the smart one. Oh, I love this one. I love it the way you love a magic trick you can't quite catch. My name's Eddie, and I should be honest with you right at the top, because we're going to be spending half an hour together, and I don't want you getting the wrong idea about me. I am not a historian. I am a fan. I am the sort of man who reads about the great swindlers of history, the way other men read about their football heroes, with my mouth slightly open, going, "Oh, that's beautiful. How did he do that?" I have a mate, Sully, and the two of us have spent whole evenings in the pub half designing the perfect con that we are, of course, far too honest and far too lazy to ever actually pull. So when I tell you this story, I'm not going to tell it to you from up on a hill, wagging my finger. I'm going to walk you right down into the middle of that line on School Street and show you exactly how a penniless nobody turned a real, dull little fact about postage stamps into $15 million. And because I actually do have a conscience under all this, exactly why it was always going to end with all those smiling people losing everything. This is the man whose name became the crime. Charles Ponzi. Come on, let me introduce you properly. First, the man himself, because you cannot understand the con without understanding the ache that drove it. He was born Carlo Ponzi in Italy, and he came to America as young men came to America in those years. On a boat, in steerage, with, by his own telling, a few dollars in his pocket, and a head absolutely stuffed with dreams. Now a small note, and I'll be doing this all the way through, because in this channel accuracy is the one thing I refuse to con you on. Ponzi told his own life story more than once, and he told it beautifully, and he was a professional liar, so some of the romantic details of his early years we take with a pinch of salt. But the shape of it is solid enough. He landed with almost nothing, and then for years he was nothing in the specific grinding way that being a poor immigrant meant being nothing. He waited tables. He washed dishes. He got fired by his own account for shortchanging the customers, which, you'll notice, is a very small early version of the exact same move. He drifted up to Canada, and there he did something that most of the breathless retellings quietly skip over, but I won't because it matters. He went to prison. Forgery up in Montreal, passing a bad check, and later back in the States more trouble over smuggling some fellow immigrants across the border. So by the time our man arrives in Boston, a grown man in his 30s, he is not a wide-eyed innocent. He has already done time. He has already learned in the hardest classroom there is that the rules were not built to let a man like him win. And he is hungry not for a meal he could get a meal. He is hungry to be somebody, to walk into a room and have it turn and look at him. Hold that hunger in your mind. It is the fuel for everything that follows. Because here's the thing about Charles Ponzi that separates him from a common thief. A common thief grabs your wallet and runs. Ponzi didn't want your wallet. He wanted you to hand him your wallet gladly and thank him for taking it, and go and fetch your friends so they could hand him theirs too. And to do that, he needed something that a common thief never bothers with. He needed a story that was true or true enough. Rule one of any con, my friend: you never sell a lie. You sell the mark a truth he desperately wants to believe, and then you let his own greed build the lie for you brick by brick, so that in the end he cons himself and thanks you for the privilege. And Ponzi found himself a genuinely lovely little truth. It came in the post. Literally. It was a boring, tiny thing called an international reply coupon. Stay with me, because this dull little scrap of paper is the whole engine of the machine. In those days, if you wrote a letter to someone in another country and you wanted to be polite and pay for their reply, you couldn't just pop your own stamps in the envelope. Your stamps were no good in their country. So the postal services of the world had agreed on a clever fix. You could buy this coupon, an international reply coupon in your country, send it along, and the person on the other end could walk into their own post office and swap it for the stamps they needed to write back. A little universal token of postage, good anywhere, deadly dull, and absolutely genuine. Now here is where the boring little coupon becomes interesting, and here is the true thing Ponzi built everything on. The First World War had just ended, and it had wrecked the currencies of Europe. Money in Italy, money in a lot of the old world, had lost enormous value against the American dollar. But these postal coupons had been priced back in the old days, in the old money. So follow this, it's the beating heart of the story, a coupon that you could buy dirt cheap in Italy, with those weak, battered liar, could in theory be brought to America and swapped for stamps worth quite a bit more than you'd paid. Buy low in a broke country, redeem high in a rich one. Pocket the difference. And I want to be scrupulously fair to the ghost of Charles Ponzi here, because this is the detail that makes the whole thing so delicious and so believable. That gap was real. On paper, in tiny amounts, you genuinely could make money doing exactly that. It has a respectable name in the money world: arbitrage, buying a thing cheap in one place and selling it dear in another, and it is perfectly legal and perfectly real. Ponzi did not invent a fantasy out of thin air. He took a true, live, working little loophole, and he held it up to the light, and it glittered. You can almost see the moment it happened behind his eyes, can't you? This penniless, jailbird, hungry to be somebody man, sitting there turning a postage coupon over in his fingers and thinking, wait, there's money in this. And there was. A little. And a little is the most dangerous phrase in the whole language of the con, because a little bit of truth is exactly enough to hang an enormous lie on. So in the winter of 1920 in Boston, Ponzi hangs out his shingle. He sets up a company with a name designed to sound like a marble bank with pillars out front, the Securities Exchange Company, and he makes an offer that should have stopped every thinking person cold. Give me your money, he says, and I will pay you 50% interest in 45 days, or if you'd rather wait 90 days, double it, 100%. Your $100 comes back as 200. Now, you and I, sitting here calmly with no line pushing at our backs, we can hear how insane that is. There is no honest business on this earth that reliably doubles money in 3 months. If there were, the richest men in the world would already own all of it, and there'd be none left for a grocer in an apron. But Ponzi had that lovely true story about the coupons to point to, and when a mark asked how, he'd wave a hand at the wreckage of Europe's currencies, and the magic of the postal coupons and the gap and the arbitrage. And it sounded like a man who'd found a secret door. Here is what he did not tell them, and here is the crack running straight through the foundation of the whole building. The coupon trick, the real one, did not scale. And I want to be careful and clear about this, because this is the hinge the whole tragedy turns on. To actually earn the kind of money he was promising to thousands of people, he would have needed to buy, ship, handle, and cash in millions upon millions of these tiny paper coupons. Physically move mountains of postage stamps and somehow turn them back into cash. And the postal system simply did not work like that. You couldn't redeem them for money in bulk. The paperwork alone would have buried an army of clerks. The thing that was true in ones and twos became flatly impossible in the millions. So the real arbitrage, the honest little engine he was pointing everybody at was, for all practical purposes, producing almost nothing. The profits he was paying out were not coming from postage coupons. They weren't coming from anywhere clever at all. They were coming from the line. This is the part that got his name stapled to the crime forever, so let me tell it plainly, and let me tell it as history, not as a how-to, because I am charmed by this man's nerve, but I am not in the business of teaching you to ruin your neighbors. What Charles Ponzi actually did was breathtakingly simple, and that simplicity is exactly why it's so lethal. When the early investors came back after 45 days for their promised 50%, he paid them, really paid them, in good cash. But that cash was not profit. That cash was, quite literally, the money that newer investors had just handed him that same week. He was taking the grocer's fresh deposit and using it to pay the widow her winnings from last month. And then he'd take the policeman's deposit to pay the grocer, and on and on. There is no coupon in that machine at all. Take it out entirely. It doesn't need one. It is just a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and a queue of people pouring water into the top faster than it drains, so that anyone who peers into the bucket at any given moment sees it brimming and thinks, "Look how full, look how rich. This man is a genius." The only thing keeping the bucket full is that the line keeps growing. Every dollar paid out in profit is really just a later dreamer's savings passed forward to an earlier one. And you can see immediately the thing that dooms it. It has to grow forever. To pay the promises of the people already in, you need more people and more money coming in behind them, always more, always faster, because the promises compound. The day the line stops growing is the day the bucket runs dry, and every single person still holding one of Ponzi's paper promises is left holding nothing at all. It was not a business that might fail. It was a countdown that looked like a business. From the very first day the clock was running. But oh, while it ran, it was glorious. And I'd be lying to you if I pretended I didn't understand exactly why every one of those people got in that line. Because Ponzi wasn't really selling coupons, and he wasn't really selling 50%. He was selling a dream, and it was the oldest, warmest, most human dream there is. The dream of the shortcut. The dream that maybe, just this once, a regular person who scrubbed floors or minded a shop could stop grinding, could leap the wall the rich men sit on top of, could give their kids the thing they never had money for nothing, and a door out of the small, hard life. He was selling hope with an interest rate on it, and he was one of their own, which mattered more than anything. To the Italian immigrants of Boston especially, here was a man who came off the same boats, who spoke their language, who had been nothing just like them, and now look at him. Fine suits, gold-topped cane, a beautiful car, a mansion out in Lexington with servants in it. He wasn't a distant Yankee banker looking down his nose. He was proof, living, beaming, well-tailored proof that it could happen to someone like you. When your neighbor, your priest, your cousin has already put money in and already been paid, the fear isn't losing your cash. The fear is being the fool who stood outside while everyone you knew got rich. That's the terrible engine underneath it, and it's the reason these things still work today, and it has nothing to do with stupidity. Some very clever, very careful people were in that line. It works because it doesn't ask you to be stupid. It only asks you to want the shortcut so badly that you stop asking the one rude question that would save you, which is, hang on, where is this money actually coming from? And there's always one, isn't there, the mark who got away? In every one of these stories, there's the one person who stood off to the side of that line, arms folded, and said, no. Not the cleverest person in Boston, necessarily. Often just the most stubborn or the most burned before. The one who heard 50% in 45 days and instead of feeling the warm little flush of the dream, felt the hair on their neck stand up and thought, that's not a door in the wall, that's a painted one. I think about that person a lot, because the difference between them and the widow who lost everything wasn't brains and it wasn't luck. It was one small, unglamorous, deeply unpopular habit. They let the rude question be louder than the wish. That's the whole game. That's the only defense there has ever been. By the summer of 1920, Charles Ponzi was the most exciting man in Boston. The estimates people give for what poured through the Securities Exchange Company vary. And I'll flag that these numbers are all estimates rather than a tidy audited ledger. But the figure that comes down to us is that in roughly 8 months he took in something on the order of $15 million. In 1920 money, reach for a sense of that. Depending on how you count it, that's north of 200 million in today's dollars, and some reckon considerably more. It came from tens of thousands of people. Clerks, widows, police officers, waiters, his own countrymen. He was reportedly taking in something like $1 million in a single week at the peak. So much cash that they were, by some accounts, stuffing it into drawers and wastebaskets because they'd run out of anywhere sensible to put it. Think about that man for a moment. Carlo, the dishwasher. Carlo, the forger who did time in Montreal, standing now in a beautiful office with money physically overflowing the furniture, mobbed by people begging him to take theirs, cheered in the street. He'd got the one thing he was starving for. He walked into rooms and they turned and looked. He was somebody. And here is a small dark truth about the con artist that I find genuinely haunting. People who knew him said he seemed, in these months, to half believe it himself. That's the trap that catches the conman along with his marks. When the money is raining down and the whole city loves you and your name is in the papers, it gets terribly, terribly easy to stop thinking of yourself as a crook running out the clock, and to start thinking of yourself as a genius who will surely, any day now, find the real trick to make the numbers true. He never did. There wasn't one. There was only ever the line. So how does it end? How does the biggest, brightest bubble in Boston go pop? Not all at once. These things almost never die from one clean bullet. They die from a few sharp people, poking at the same time until the story springs a leak it can't seal. The first poke came from the press, and it's a genuinely great piece of history, so it earns its own moment. The Boston Post, a newspaper, started to dig. Real, patient, skeptical reporting. The kind that just keeps asking the rude question over and over. Where is the money coming from? Their investigation into Ponzi would later be honored with a Pulitzer Prize, which tells you it was the real thing, journalism at its best, not just noise. Then came the numbers man, and this is my favorite blow of all because it's so quiet and so lethal. a hard-nosed financial writer named Clarence Barron, a man who knew his way around a balance sheet, was asked to actually look at the coupon story. And he pointed out something so simple and so devastating that you can only sit back and admire it. If Ponzi's profits truly came from international reply coupons, then to back the tens of millions of dollars he'd taken in, there would have to be an absolute ocean of these coupons in circulation, many millions of them, more than the whole world actually contained. And Barron noted that the real number of these coupons out there in existence was tiny. A comparative handful, nowhere near enough, not remotely, not by a distance you could measure with a telescope, to have generated the fortune Ponzi claimed. The engine everyone believed in didn't just run slow. The engine was barely there. And then the betrayal from the inside, which, honestly, is how so many of these come apart. Ponzi, in his vanity, had hired himself a publicity man, a fellow named William McMasters, to polish his golden image in the papers. But McMasters, poking around the operation to write his glowing puff pieces, got close enough to see the truth of it. And what he saw frightened him. He worked out that his dazzling client was, underneath all the marble and the fine suits, hopelessly, catastrophically broke, that the numbers could not possibly add up. And instead of cashing in on the secret, McMasters turned. He went to the very newspaper Ponzi had been feuding with and told them in print that his own employer was insolvent. The hired trumpeter blew the whistle instead. Now put yourself back in that line on School Street, but a few weeks later. The papers are full of doubt. Whispers are running through the neighborhoods. And the mood of the crowd flips, and it flips the way it always flips with these things, all at once, like a shoal of fish turning. The people who were shoving to get their money in come shoving, white-faced now, to get their money out. They line up again, but this time nobody is smiling. This time they want their savings back today in cash. This is the moment of truth for any operation like Ponzi's, and it is always fatal because remember what's really in the bucket. There are no coupons. There's no vault of profit. There is only whatever cash happens to be sloshing at the top from the most recent deposits. And it comes nowhere close to what he owes the tens of thousands of people holding his promises. For a little while, Ponzi, cool as ever, actually pays the panicking crowd, handing out cash at the counter with a smile to calm them, even sending out coffee and donuts to the people waiting, trying to slow the stampede with charm. It's almost magnificent. It's a man trying to plug a bursting dam with his own two hands in a nice manner. But you cannot charm arithmetic. The authorities brought in someone to do the one thing Ponzi could never survive, actually open the books and add it all up. An audit. And the audit found exactly what Barron and the Post and McMasters had all been circling. There were no earnings. There was no coupon empire. The Securities Exchange Company was staggeringly, hopelessly insolvent. He owed millions upon millions more than he could ever pay, and behind the beautiful story there was simply nothing there. Nothing but the line, and the line had stopped growing. And so, in August of 1920, the beaming little king of Boston was arrested. The dream for tens of thousands of people was over, and here's where I have to stop grinning because now we count the cost, and this is the part the man himself never had to look at. When it all collapsed, the ordinary people got back only pennies on the dollar, if that. The grocer's shop money, the widow's purse, the young policeman's savings, the immigrant brother's envelope with their whole life folded inside it. Gone, most of it, for good, not stolen at knife point but coaxed out of them with a warm smile and a story about postage stamps and a dream of the shortcut. Some were wiped out completely. That's the human bill for the cleverness, and I won't pretty it up. As for Ponzi himself, the law was not done with him for a long, long time. He was convicted of fraud. He went to prison, got out, was tried again, ran off to Florida under another name to work a fresh swindle in swampland real estate, was caught again, was sent back to prison again. In and out for years. And finally, in 1934, having never become an American citizen, he was deported, put on a boat and sent back to Italy, arriving, one imagines, with a good deal less than the tens of millions that had once overflowed his office drawers. The last chapter is a quiet one, and it's the one that stays with me. The man whose name became a byword for getting rich off other people's dreams did not die rich. He drifted, and his schemes abroad came to nothing, and he ended up far from Boston and far from Italy, in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And there, in 1949, Charles Ponzi died partly blind, partly paralyzed in a charity ward, on the money the state gives a man who has none. Penniless. The exact condition he'd spent his whole furious life trying to escape. He came in with nothing and he went out with nothing, and in between he touched more money than most of us will see in 100 lifetimes and kept not $1 of it. And now the twist that I absolutely cannot leave out, because it's the strangest immortality a con man ever earned. Charles Ponzi did not invent the scheme that carries his name. He wasn't first, not even close. Robbing the new investors to pay the old ones is an ancient dance. Swindlers had been doing versions of it long before he ever fingered a postage coupon. There's a marvelous case decades earlier, in the Boston of the 1880s. A woman named Sarah Howe who ran a ladies' deposit promising outrageous returns to women, and paid the early depositors with the later ones' money. The very same machine, generations before Ponzi shined his shoes. So why is it his name on the crime? Why do we say a Ponzi scheme and not a Howe scheme? Because he did it bigger and brighter and more shamelessly and in front of more newspapers than anyone before him. He turned a grubby little swindle into a spectacle, a citywide fever, a fortune raining into wastebaskets. He didn't get the patent. He got the trademark. History, it turns out, doesn't remember the first man to do a thing. It remembers the one who did it so loudly that everyone had to give it a name. And that, in the end, may be the most Charles Ponzi fact of all. Even his fame is a kind of con, credit for an invention that wasn't his, and he'd have loved every second of it. So here's where I turn it around on you, the way I always do, because I didn't walk you down that line just so you could feel clever about a dead man's marks. The reason I can't look away from Charles Ponzi, the reason he charms me even as I count the widows he ruined, is that his con didn't work by finding stupid people. It worked by finding a hope that lives in absolutely everyone, me very much included. The hope that there's a shortcut, that the wall the rich people sit on has a secret door in it, and a nice man in a good suit knows where. That maybe, just this once, you can get the thing you want without the years of grinding for it. Ponzi didn't put that dream in those people. It was already there. He just charged admission to it. And it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not in a line on School Street anymore. It's in your pocket. It's the message promising you unreal returns if you act before midnight. The opportunity a friend of a friend swears is paying out, that only works as long as they keep recruiting more friends. My own nephew, good lad, sharp lad, very nearly handed his savings to a slick little scheme on his phone last year, not because he's a fool, but because for a minute the dream shouted louder than the rude question. And the rude question is the only armor any of us has ever had. It's the one Baron asked about the coupons, the The one the Boston Post kept asking till the whole thing cracked. Just 5 words. Where is the money coming from? If a promise can't answer that plainly, if the honest answer turns out to be from the next person in line, then you already know how the story ends. So that's my genuine question for you, and I read the comments, everyone, so tell me down below. What's the too good to be true that you have wanted to believe? The deal, the shortcut, the sure thing that some part of you is still a little sad wasn't real. I'm not asking to laugh at you. I'm asking because naming the dream out loud is exactly how you take its power away, and because I want to know I'm not the only one who's ever stood in that line in his own head. Put it below. I'll be reading. I'll leave you with this and then I'll let you go. I spend my life half in love with these people, these swindlers, because the nerve of them is genuinely something to behold. But Charles Ponzi died blind and broke in a charity ward, having held a fortune and kept nothing, remembered forever as a warning with his own name on it. Every con, no matter how beautiful, sends its bill in the end to the marks first, and sooner or later to the conman too. So admire the cleverness by all means. Sully and I certainly will. Just keep one hand on your wallet, keep asking that rude little question, and never, ever let anyone sell you a dream with an interest rate on it. Because that, my friend, is how you lose your shirt. I'm Eddie. Mind how you go, and if a thing sounds too good to be true, come back next time, and I'll show you exactly who's already sold it. Subscribe, and I'll keep letting you in on the best cons history ever pulled. Take care of yourself out there.